Pokémon is a series I love for many reasons, at least when it comes to the games. The strategy that can go into team building, the collection of Pokémon, and the designs of many of them are some of the main reasons. With the third point, many may know how many cultural or ecological ties go into both the appearance and names of so many of over 1,000 different pocket monsters, and I'd like to bring attention to some of the more esoteric or subtle ones you may not have thought of. Now I'll order these in terms of factors such as subtlety or how unknown they are to most. It isn't exactly a strict top 10, and simply 10, or technically 11, examples I wanted to bring attention to. From a Western perspective, some may be confused on what Glalie is meant to be. A football? Or soccer ball, to those who think a game where the ball is carried half the time deserves to be called football. A hockey mask? The Japanese audience will immediately consider it to be an onigiri, based on its colour scheme and native name onigori. There is a bit more to it though, with the horns being styled like those of a traditional Japanese oni, to make a pun. Much like how Zoro's onigiri attack in One Piece is a pun on how the phrase can be alternatively written as oni slice, when onigori can be read as oni cold. The football assumption isn't fully inaccurate though, as the Japanese name can also be taken from goalie, a fairly simple combination but one I believe more Western fans should be aware of. Incineroar is another one where the origins may seem clear to Japanese audiences, but possibly not so for those in other countries. Despite its wrestler design and dark, or Japanese Aku, or evil typing, its Pokédex entry in Shield mentions its habit of helping out small Pokemon to make it apparent it intentionally plays a heel role in wrestling. This makes its design origins obvious to those who know of the iconic manga Tiger Mask, in which the protagonist, Date Naoto, is originally a heel wrestler dressing as the titular Tiger Mask, until a desire to be a role model for children had him become a face. Considering the age of the manga though, as well as its very limited exposure in several countries, I found it worth noting. There may be another anime reference within it with its Japanese name, Gaugaen. Not only does it sound fairly similar to the titular Brave robot in the anime King of Braves Gaogaiga, but the similarities in the colour palette are difficult to unsee. The manga and anime references don't stop as we move into Blacephalon. There's an obscure space theme to its conception when considering it is the only non-psychic type, a type heavily associated with space, to learn Expanding Force. Its clown features may reference the Clownface Nebula as well. When I see its shiny form in particular, I can't help but think it may have been inspired by the villain Planet Man from the manga series Kinnikuman. Both can even manipulate where their head is compared to their body, or their entire body structure in Plant Man's case. And, with how iconic the manga was amongst those who grew up in the 80s, it wouldn't be a stretch to say it was what inspired Blacephalon. Volcarona is probably the Pokemon to be a stand-in encounter like legendaries, to best give off the same legendary presence as them, though the case could be made for Spiritomb and Sinnoh. This is no surprise when considering its 6 fiery winds and lack of feet evokes ideas of the Seraphim Angels. Gogoat is a Pokemon many look at and question where the idea of it being a leafy goat came from, when the designs past the earlier generations tend to be more focused on having the type and tie to their cultural inspirations. The most likely source would be in the Yule Goat, a Scandinavian pagan symbol of Yuletide meant to represent the sun entering the sign of Capricornus, before being reinvented as a Christmas symbol of St. Nicholas mounting the goat as a symbol of overpowering the devil. A more well-known inspiration could be the goat attributes of the nature god Pan, and his Roman equivalent Faunus. Phalanx seems to be a simple Pokemon, being based on a Roman phalanx formation with its Pokédex entries reaffirming this. It's exactly this simple origin that may be so surprising to some though, as the phalanx formation's use is given so little attention in mainstream entertainment concerning Rome, other than the HBO series. with the strategy of constantly changing the frontline soldiers in an organised manner being one of the aspects that made Rome's military so effective. One thing history buffs will be aware of though is the armour of Phalanx being closer to that of the Spartans rather than the Romans, and this seems to be intentional. Its signature status move, No Retreat's original Japanese name being an idiom for last stand, which fits well when the Spartans were of course responsible for one of the most famous last stands of all time, at Thermopylae. Slowbro seems like one that's not much more than a mishmash of various creatures to make something unique, as with several Gen 1 Pokemon. What brings it here is its Japanese name, Yadoran. This name is partially based on Yugoslavian singer Jadranka Stojakovic, due to a former colleague of hers having joined Game Freak during the conception of the Pokemon franchise. A nice little tribute to sneak into the name of a Pokemon. Considering their branched evolution, version exclusivity, and similar point of origin, I have to tie Armarouge and Ceruledge together. Both tie into Spanish history quite well, which is fitting of Paldea. Armarouge seems to be based on Wilfred the Hairy, a golden armoured knight associated with Catalonia. Ceruledge's two swords make its ties to the heroic Spanish knight El Cid, and his swords Tizona and Colada quite apparent. There are also legends that El Cid's corpse was fitted with his armour and sent on his horse into battle during the siege of Valencia to bolster morale and win the battle, which makes the ghost typing fit well. Cantonian Ninetales' origin as a Kyubi no Kitsune are very obvious to any with a surface level knowledge of Japanese yokai, or even just anyone who's ever watched Naruto. Alolan Ninetales, on the other hand, is something that requires a bit more digging. There's still the Japanese ties of some stories saying kitsune that have become Kyubi no Kitsune become white in colour, not far off Alolan Ninetales' pale colour, and become Tenko, heavenly foxes. This tie to divinity feeds into the Hawaiian location of this Ninetales, with the snow goddess Poliahu having said to reside on Mauna Kea, of which Mount Lanakila in Alola seems to be based on, and where its previous stage Vulpix can be found. Another source which highlights the magical aspect of its fairy typing is the Finnish Tulikettu, that's said to have created the Aurora Borealis. The Finnish word for aurora, Revontulet, also translates as foxfires, which links Finns back to Ninetales' original fire typing. Zweilous is the Pokemon that inspired this video when I considered what could be behind this design. Those of you familiar with Loxton's videos will know of how tied to alchemy many of the concepts in Gen 7 were, but Gen 5 isn't without that too, with Zweilous seeming to draw from a very esoteric alchemical idea. When looking into two-headed dragons in mythology, little seemed to come up that could be tied to Zweilous. Even in pop culture, the closest that came to my mind was the Ebosisk from Willow. That is until I learnt of an alchemical illustration of a two-headed dragon that originally appeared in the alchemical text Liber Patris Sapientiae, and crops up again in another such text, Buch der Heiligen Dreifaltigkeit, the Book of the Holy Trinity. It seems to represent the concept of Mercurius, or the creation of the perfect being through the combination of opposites. Many may be familiar with this through the symbol's cameo within Full Metal Alchemist. How this links to Zweilous' lore and mechanics seem less apparent though, when this would be expected of a legendary Pokemon rather than the middle of an evolutionary line. Assuming this was the source, I take it that those at Game Freak who designed Hydreigon's evolutionary line may have taken a surface level look at some alchemical drawings for the designs, considering three-headed dragons also appear in such drawings. Though there were obviously many Pokemon whose cultural depth I could have dug into, these were 10 I felt more attention needed to be given to. If this is the type of Pokemon content you'd like to see more of, simply say so and I may make similar videos on those of certain nations' culture in the future.